It's September 17th, 2018, and it's time to review 5 of the most outrageous, infuriating, or just plain baffling things that have happened lately. It's your Facepalm 5. Let's count them down. Number 1. Cop enters wrong apartment, shoots, and kills person living there. Week before last, a Dallas police officer entered what she apparently thought was her apartment, saw someone inside who presumably she took to be an intruder, pulled her service weapon, and shot the apparent intruder, who later died at a hospital. Except it wasn't her apartment, and the person she shot wasn't an intruder. He was right where he was supposed to be. He was home. The officer, Amber Geiger, is white. The man she killed, Botham Shem Jean, was black, which adds an additional layer of context to this senseless tragedy. Oddly, or actually not oddly, since this is the United States where police officers kill unarmed people of color routinely and rarely face serious consequences, Amber Geiger was not arrested until 3 days after the shooting. She was charged initially with manslaughter and released on bail and placed on administrative leave from the police department. But many observers of this case, including the family of Botham Shem Jean, are wondering why it took so long for authorities to charge Geiger when there was never any doubt that she was responsible for the shooting. In addition to dragging its feet on charging Geiger, several days later, the Dallas Police Department released a list of items recovered from Jean's apartment after the execution of a search warrant, including 10 grams of marijuana. Dallas PD released this information the same day as Jean's funeral. Jean's apartment is directly above Geiger's, and apparently what happened is she didn't realize she was on the wrong floor and entered his apartment thinking it was hers. Given the efforts of some, including the Dallas Police Department, to criminalize the victim here, I think it's important to remember that Botham Shem Jean did absolutely nothing wrong in this situation. It doesn't matter how much pot he had in his apartment. It doesn't matter what he was doing at the time. He was where he was supposed to be. He was home. The police officer was the intruder. She invaded his home, probably accidentally, and she shot him and killed him recklessly. And yet, even when the black person who was killed by the cop is inarguably, utterly blameless, there are still people who try to suggest that on some level, he kind of had it coming. I mean, he must have, right? Why else would a police officer shoot somebody? Number 2, newspaper stands behind racist cartoon of Serena Williams. Last week, Serena Williams, one of the most dominant players in the history of tennis or any other sport, lost in the finals of the US Open to rising superstar Naomi Osaka. That in and of itself isn't so unusual. Even Serena Williams can't win them all. But the match was controversial because of a confrontation between Williams and chair umpire Carlos Ramos. After Ramos charged Williams with multiple penalties, Williams called him a liar and a thief and demanded an apology. Ramos subsequently charged Williams with a game penalty, meaning the game they were currently playing was automatically awarded to Osaka, who went on to win the match and the US Open, her first Grand Slam title. Williams was fined $17,000 for her various rule infractions, which is no big deal, especially since her purse as the runner-up in the tournament was over $1.8 million. After the match, Williams accused the umpire of sexism, insisting that he would not have treated a male player the way he treated her. The heads of the Women's Tennis Association and the U.S. Tennis Association, as well as tennis legend Billie Jean King, all expressed support for Williams. The International Tennis Federation, the governing body of professional tennis, sided with Ramos, saying he had acted in accordance with the rules, with professionalism and integrity. Then, as if all that wasn't newsworthy enough, the next day, the Herald Sun newspaper of Melbourne, Australia, published this editorial cartoon by Mark Knight, depicting Serena Williams stomping on her racket and throwing a tantrum while in the background the umpire asks her opponent to just let Williams win. Notice not only that Serena Williams is drawn like a Jim Crow-era caricature of a black person, but also that her opponent appears to be a petite, blonde-haired white woman. Again, Williams' opponent in that match was Naomi Osaka. This is Naomi Osaka. Now, why in the world would the artist want to replace Naomi Osaka with a blonde white girl in this cartoon? Let's think. In response to widespread condemnation of the cartoon, the Herald Sun published an edition with this front page containing several other caricatures. The headline, "Welcome to PC World," followed by, "If the self-appointed censors of Mark Knight get their way on his Serena Williams cartoon, our new politically correct life will be very dull indeed." So, expecting political cartoonists to not draw black people the way racist propagandists did 100 years ago is political correctness run wild. Oh, we have to be able to mock black people based on crude stereotypes while encouraging our white readers to view themselves as victims of unjustified black grievance and entitlement, because if we couldn't, wouldn't life be boring? We have to be able to have a laugh at the expense of the dignity of people of color whilst simultaneously empowering and enraging our white racist readers. And if we can't do that, I just think I'd rather not even be here. I mean, I say we try it out at least. See how it goes? Number 3, Trump's Supreme Court nominee accused of sexual misconduct. Brett Kavanaugh, Trump's nominee to fill the vacant seat on the U.S. Supreme Court, has been accused of attempting to rape a woman while they were both high school students during the 1980s. The accuser, who has remained anonymous, sent a letter to her congressional representative, Anna Eshoo, back in July, shortly after Kavanaugh's nomination was announced. The letter was also sent to Senator Dianne Feinstein, who revealed last week that the matter had been referred to the FBI for investigation. According to his accuser, Kavanaugh and a friend of his held her down while Kavanaugh covered her mouth with his hand and attempted to force himself on her. She was able to get away before it went any further, but she reportedly says in her letter that the incident has been an ongoing source of stress and that she has sought therapy as a result of it. Naturally, Kavanaugh denies the whole thing, but to me the most interesting response came from Republican Senator Charles Grassley, chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. The day after Feinstein released her statement about referring the letter about Kavanaugh to the FBI, and the same day as a report on the allegations was published by The New Yorker, Grassley released a letter signed by 65 women who claimed to have known Kavanaugh in high school, declaring that, quote, "he has always treated women with decency and respect." Sure was lucky Grassley just happened to have that letter testifying to Kavanaugh's history of treating women just swell, signed by 65 women who knew him in high school, ready just in case he was accused of some terrible act of sexual misconduct against a woman he knew in high school, huh? See, this is a lesson. This is why preparedness, thorough, exhaustive preparedness, is so important. I believe these accusations against Kavanaugh because my default position in these cases is to trust the accuser unless and until I have a reason not to. But even if these allegations turn out to be false, Brett Kavanaugh is a man who seems to have lied under oath to a Senate committee, has had a massive amount of his records withheld from the confirmation process, doesn't seem to know how birth control pills work, and oh yeah, he was nominated by a president who is currently an unindicted co-conspirator in a criminal investigation, so there are still plenty of reasons not to confirm him to a lifetime post on the Supreme Court. Everyone in the Senate? Number 4, detention of migrant children reaches highest level ever. Thought this story was old news, didn't you? Yeah. No. Last week, the New York Times reported that there are now more migrant children being held in federal custody than at any other time on record. Most of these children aren't being held as a result of the family separations that resulted from Trump's so-called zero-tolerance border enforcement policy. Rather, they are unaccompanied minors who were apprehended crossing the border without parents or other adult guardians. The Times puts the current number of migrant children in U.S. custody at 12,800. The number of migrant children in U.S. custody in May of last year was 2,400. I'll go ahead and do the math for you. That's an increase of over 10,000 in just over a year. The Times article reports that the number of unaccompanied minors crossing the border is about the same as it's been the last few years. The reason the number of migrant children now in custody is so much higher than it was even just a year ago is that usually when unaccompanied minors are apprehended, they're released to live with sponsors, relatives, or foster families who have been vetted by federal agencies, but that placement process has slowed by about 2/3 since last year. According to the Times, traditionally many of those who step up to sponsor unaccompanied minors are undocumented immigrants themselves, people who are now hesitant to identify themselves to immigration authorities. So, because undocumented immigrants who might otherwise be able to care for these children don't trust the administration to not deport them should they come forward to help, which, given recent history, is a completely reasonable attitude to have, I must say, we are now stuck with 13,000 children living in an ever-increasing series of detention camps. And honestly, as long as Donald Trump is president of the United States, I don't see that changing anytime soon. Correction, I do see it changing. That number is going to keep going up year after year for as long as he's president. Well, speak of the devil, it is now time for the segment devoted to some of the other things Donald Trump has done recently to disgrace the presidency and embarrass and or endanger the United States and the rest of the world. It's number 5, The Further Misadventures of Lord Dampnut. Please keep in mind, as always, the following is not a complete list. He reacted to the publication of Bob Woodward's new book about his presidency by claiming it was full of made-up quotes and that Woodward is a Democratic Party operative, and to a critical New York Times op-ed by an anonymous member of his own administration by tweeting treason and calling on the Justice Department to investigate and discover the identity of the author. According to an article in the New York Daily News written by a former vice president in the Trump Organization, when Trump Tower was being designed, Trump told an architect, I'm sorry, I know that every time I do these videos, I say at the beginning of this segment, it's not a complete list, and that's going to be especially true this time because I really don't feel like talking about anything else that Trump has done lately but what he tweeted about Puerto Rico. So, as most of you probably know, last week, as Hurricane Florence was approaching the U.S. mainland, Trump tweeted, quote, 3,000 people did not die in the 2 hurricanes that hit Puerto Rico. When I left the island after the storm had hit, they had anywhere from 6 to 18 deaths. As time went by, it did not go up by much. Then, a long time later, they started to report really large numbers like 3,000. This was done by the Democrats in order to make me look as bad as possible when I was successfully raising billions of dollars to help rebuild Puerto Rico. If a person died for any reason, like old age, just add them onto the list. Bad politics. I love Puerto Rico. This is one of the most appalling and shameless things any president has ever said. That figure of 3,000 as the death toll from Hurricane Maria was derived from a study conducted by researchers at George Washington University. It is comparable to estimates by other organizations. It has been accepted as the official death toll by the governor of Puerto Rico. The death toll of Hurricane Maria was not inflated by Democrats to make Donald Trump look bad. It speaks volumes of this man's impenetrable narcissism that he not only can't help but make this all about him, but he thinks that people need to make this kind of stuff up to make him look bad. If someone wants to make Donald Trump look bad, all they have to do is get someone to just look at him. Because whatever he's saying or doing at any given moment is probably going to make him look bad because he's bad. He's a bad president. He's a bad human being. He's trying to deny and erase the deaths of 3,000 people because he thinks that it's something that the Democrats just made up. because he wants to claim his administration's belated and grudging and inadequate response to that hurricane as a victory. Oh, 3,000 people died on Puerto Rico? No, they didn't. I did a good job. Those people didn't die. That's fake news. He thinks nothing of it. He thinks absolutely nothing of just erasing all those 3,000 people. And it's not that they didn't actually die. It's even worse than that. It's that to Trump, to the President of the United States, they might as well not have ever lived in the first place. Because he didn't care then. And he doesn't care now. It makes no difference to him. He probably sincerely doesn't think they're real. He probably sincerely believes that it's all a conspiracy against him, that all of these various authorities and organizations got together and made this up just to embarrass him. You know, whenever I write these videos, I always leave myself a note at the end of them that says, "Did you write jokes?" You probably can't see that because of the glare and the focus, but it says at the bottom, it's a reminder to myself, did you write jokes? Because these Facepalm 5 videos, I don't want them to just be collections of pure anger and grief and confusion. I want to soften the blow a little bit, because I know that I very often talk about some very heavy, depressing things that have happened in the news, and I want to take the edge off of that a little bit if I can with humor. But how do you write a joke about this? How do you write a joke about the President of the United States casually erasing the deaths of 3,000 people, 3,000 Americans, 3,000 human beings? Their deaths just didn't happen. They're just gone. They don't matter. Because he thinks it makes him look bad, or he thinks someone else is trying to make him look bad. How do you write a joke about that? That is a joke. That's a joke. It's not funny. But what else do you call it? Anyway, that's 5. Speak out, act out, resist, look after each other. Hey folks, hope you got something out of this one. If you did, please click like and share the video and subscribe to the channel. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like these and like all the videos I make on this channel by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron for as little as $1 a month. But if you can afford it and you think I'm worth it, you can pledge at higher amounts. And if you pledge at $5 a month or more, you get yourself a shout out at the end of the Facepalm 5, just like these awesome people who have become my newest $5 plus patrons since the last Facepalm 5, and their names are Chris Sanders, thank you Chris, Tim Whittle, thank you Tim, Ellie Flanagan, thank you Ellie, Paul Andrews, thank you Paul, Ruby O'Connor, thank you Ruby, and Nathaniel Lawton. Thank you, Nathaniel. Thanks to everybody. If you are a patron at any level, whether it's $1 or $5 or $10 or $20, whatever level you're pledging at, I so thank you for your support. I need it. I appreciate it. I couldn't do this without you. And all of you who aren't patrons because you can't afford it or it's just not something you're interested in doing, but you watch the videos, you share them, you subscribe to the channel, you click like, you do all the free stuff to help support the channel. I appreciate you too, and thank you for your support as well, and I will see you all next time.